land acknowledgement before we get into the roll call. So this is a land acknowledgement written and gifted by Luis Miranda Ramirez with edits from Dr. Thomas Moore from 2020. As Marina Coast Water District celebrates its 60th year providing publicly owned water service to its customers in Marina and the Ord community, we acknowledge that our service area is located on the traditional lands of the Esselen people. They are known today as Ohlone Costanoan Esselen Nation. We respect their elders, past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture, and hopes of the Esselen people. We also acknowledge the government of the Ohlone Costanoan Esselen Nation and appreciate the spiritual role it plays today in preserving the cultural, historical, and heritage beliefs of the Esselen people. And finally, we are grateful that they share their traditional lands with us. All right, thank you. And well, roll call, please.
Director Moore,
Present.
Director Morton,
Present.
Director Zepperman is absent, Vice President Cortez,
Here.
and President Schreiner.
Here. And then we understand Director Zepperman will be a little bit later, so we'll watch for him. Also, I understand item 9A needs to be removed. So on the agenda, I believe page 73, or no, sorry, 71, 9A is removed and it will reappear on an agenda at a future date. All right. Let's see. General Manager Schertzinger, would you like to lead us in a pledge of allegiance tonight?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the
republic
for which it
which
stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Tonight, we go right on into oral communications. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so at this time. Please limit your comment to 4 minutes, and the public may comment on other items listed on the agenda at the time they are considered by the board. We have some people in the attendee list. I'm looking to see if you put your Zoom hand up. I can't really see you on the screen, so you need to put a Zoom hand up. I don't see any phone numbers, so that doesn't.
I don't see any, Madam President.
All right, then we'll go ahead with number 5, the Marina Coast Water District Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We have an action item to consider adopting resolution number 2022 GSA 01 to approve the Monterey Subbasin GSP.
Yes, good evening, President Schreiner and members of the board. Yes, agenda item number 5A1 is requesting the board of directors conduct a public hearing to consider the adoption of the resolution to adopt the Monterey Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan. This is the plan we've been working on since SGMA has been passed in 2014, and it's the culmination of many years of work and effort by staff and our consulting team in coordination with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. We have Vera Nelson with EKI, who's going to do a general overview or a quick overview of the process we followed, and also an overview of the plan, and then we'll be available to take any questions. And General Manager Schertzinger or Council Basuda, do we open the hearing now or do we wait till after the presentation? Okay, so.
Excuse me, but there is an attendee that had his hand up, and I don't know if it was for this item or for the oral comments.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Nelson, let's see. So just before we go to the public, Let me just check in then. So what we're doing is a little out of the usual order. Are we opening the public comment right now? And then we're gonna have from EKI present.
Okay, do you want me to speak now or do you want me to wait?
Yeah,
Glenn, are you talking as a public comment on non-agendized items, or are you talking on the GSP?
On the agenda item number 1.
Okay, just give us a second.
Okay, no worries. I haven't done this before, so I raised my hand too early. Sorry.
No worries.
no problem, no problem. And then it threw me that the staff asked about opening the public hearing, but you meant as a presentation by the consultant first, right? Or no?
Roger, how do you prefer? Public hearing first or second?
I think you can open the public hearing and let Vero Nelson give a report, and
I'm on board.
Okay. All right. So
Okay.
Jan, we want to
So-
open the public hearing, let the public speak, then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll have the consultant deliver their presentation.
Okay, it's an interesting way to do it. If I were the public, I would probably want to hear more about what I might ask
Yeah,
questions about.
my suggestion is to open the public hearing, have Vera Nelson give her presentation, and get the public comment, and then close the public hearing.
Okay.
All right, so I'm confusing public hearing and public comments. So we are going to have a public hearing. We're going to start with the consultant's presentation. Then we will have the public comments as a part of the public hearing.
Got it.
Love it. All right, then. Thank you so much, Ms. Nelson from EKI then is up.
Hold on, Madam President, you need to open the public hearing.
Oh, I have to say those words, right?
Yes.
We will now open the public hearing for the Monterey Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to share my screen.
There we go.
I'm going to have to restart that. I'm sorry. It just immediately went to a different setting.
Yeah, things have been happening like that lately. Take your time.
It's those Macintosh computers. If you just had a PC.
I don't think so.
So Miss Riso, you see Mr. Zephyrin is logged on.
Hey, welcome, Director Zephyrin. Yeah, earlier today in a Zoom, I could never get the audio to work. I ended up doing that double thing I've seen people do with a phone and the computer. Just happens.
I am sorry, it'll take me just one more minute here. I think I'm figuring it out, but it is giving me a problem.
Okay.
Paula, I just want to let you know that I'm here now.
Yay, welcome. Well, you barely missed, but there was an announcement that item 9A on page 71 has been pulled.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The
we just opened the public
Five A.
hearing.
Okay, gotcha.
That's right.
Thank you.
For 5A. And EKI is just having a little trouble with the presentation loading up correctly. Well, I suppose we could have the public comment after all before EKI's presentation.
Well, I'm just going to go with it like this. This is, it's not going to take the whole screen, but I think it'll be fine.
Okay, yeah, I can read it.
So the purpose of the presentation really is to provide an overview of the groundwater sustainability plan for the Monterey subbasin. As Patrick said, this is something that we've been working on now for many years. And there has been a lot of work done pursuant to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014. It was co-developed by Marina Coast Water District and the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. It provides a path to achievable, sustainable groundwater management and the avoidance of undesirable results within the next 20 years, basically following GSP adoption. The Monterey Subbasin GSP is due for submittal to DWR on the 31st of January, 2022. The Monterey GSP was adopted by the Salinas Valley Basin GSA on the 13th of January of 2022 and is up for adoption today by Marina Coast Water District GSA. There has been a series of stakeholder engagement meetings as well as conference calls and workshops. There have been 25 public meetings held by MCWD and Salinas Valley Basin GSA during the GSP development. It included 11 meetings by MCWD, 5 stakeholder workshops, and 6 board meetings that have been held beginning in 2018. There was an additional meeting held at the request of the Marina Coast Board in October of 2027, where there was a lot of additional outreach done to make sure that everyone was aware that might be interested in commenting on the plan. There were numerous comments on the GSP, 46 comment letters in total, 623 pages submitted. Over 400 verbal comments were provided during stakeholder meetings held by MCWD and the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. The comments and the responses to the comments on the GSP are tabulated and presented in Appendix 2C through 2F, and provide an overview of all of the different comments and the responses and changes to the GSP that were made in response to stakeholder engagement. The one thing that I'd like to emphasize is that this is an adaptive management plan and will evolve. And so to the extent that there are additional comments by the board or the public, they'll have many opportunities in the future to make these comments and for the plan to be adopted as more information is obtained and conditions become better understood, both in the basin itself and the adjacent basins. With that, I'd like to provide an overview of the GSP itself. Just a brief technical summary, which I know we've had extensive presentations to the board and the stakeholders outlining the contents of the plan. This really is just a brief overview of the conclusions and sort of contents of the plan. The plan includes 10 chapters. It includes a summary of the agency information, introduction, the plan area, the stakeholder engagement and communication that has occurred during the plan, the hydrogeologic conceptual model, a groundwater conditions assessment, a water budget, monitoring network, the sustainable management criteria, the projects and management actions that have been identified to bring the basin into sustainability, and the GSP implementation program. There's one plan that has been developed for the entire subbasin, which was co-developed, as I said, by Salinas Valley Basin GSA and the MCWD GSA. There's two management areas that have been identified. One is the Marina Ord area. The information for that area was developed primarily by MCWD, and it includes the district service area as well as former Fort Ord. MCWD is the only water supplier in that area and basically serves 3,200 to 4,200 acre feet per year during this historical period of groundwater. There's also the Corral de Tierra area, which is the southern portion and sort of in the uplands area of the basin, which the information was developed by Salinas Valley Basin GSA. The total groundwater use is approximated at 2,500 acre feet per year in that area. And it consists of multiple small and large drinking water systems, domestic wells, about 100 acres of agriculture, as well as golf course. The plan defines the hydrogeologic conceptual model and includes a groundwater conditions assessment. It defines the principal aquifers within the basin and describes the geology and hydrogeology through both graphical information, maps, and cross sections. It identifies the subbasin conditions relative to the 6 Sigma sustainability indicators for which sustainable management criteria are established. These include seawater intrusion, lowering of groundwater levels, reduction of storage, water quality degradation, surface water depletion, and land subsidence. These are all information regarding each of these sustainability indicators is described in detail in the plan for the Monterey subbasin. Within the Marina Ord area, sustainable management criteria are established for each of these sustainability indicators, including the limiting of further advancement of seawater intrusion, which is probably the primary concern within this basin. The sustainable management criteria that have been developed in order to support that, that criteria are the stabilization of groundwater levels, particularly in the 400-foot and deep aquifers where groundwater levels have been declining. The sustainable management criteria that have been established within the groundwater sustainability plan include minimum thresholds set at 2015 levels and measurable objectives set at 2004 levels. So basically bringing the water levels in the basin back up to where they were in 2004. There are the other sustainability indicators that exist are interconnected surface waters, where basically the plan calls for maintaining historical stable water levels near areas of groundwater dependent ecosystems, to limit further reduction in groundwater storage through management of seawater intrusion and groundwater levels, no long-term subsidence, none of which has been observed to date within the basin, and then no additional exceedances of drinking water or basin plan water quality standards due to GSA groundwater management actions. With regard to the water budget for the Marina Ord area, what we know or has been estimated really is that recharge within that basin is estimated over the historical period between 2004 and 2018 which is pretty consistent with the historical hydrogeologic cycle, is that the recharge to the basin is about 6,100 acre feet per year. Well, pumping within the basin has actually been below that at around 4,300 acre feet per year over the historical period. But there's been a lot of groundwater flow out of the basin, both water that is fresh and water that has seawater in it. In other words, the presumed to be seawater. What we know is that there are inflows from the seaside basin into the Marina Ord area of about 1,300 acre feet, but there's about 25,700 acre feet of water, fresh water, that leaves the Monterey subbasin into the 180-foot aquifer subbasin. And then there's also some outflow to the ocean. There's also interbasin flow between that's seawater from the ocean that passes through the Monterey subbasin into the 180-foot aquifer subbasin. The Marina Ord area also receives about 1,500 acre feet of groundwater that basically migrates downhill from the Corral de Tierra area. Over the historical period, there's been on average about 1,600 acre feet per year lost in storage from the Marina Ord area. And that's reflected by the decreases in groundwater elevations that are observed in the 400-foot aquifer and also in the deep aquifer, particularly since about 2008 within the Marina Ord area. With regard to the projected water budget, this is something that is also included in the GSP. It looks into the future to see what conditions will be like based on climate, projected future land uses, projected groundwater extraction within the Monterey subbasin, which are based on the urban water management plan for the Marina Ord area and are estimated to be in the range of 9,500 acre feet per year by about 2040. And then there are several scenarios that are identified based on potential boundary conditions with the adjacent subbasin. The GSP assumes that the adjacent subbasins will also achieve sustainability based on their sustainable management criteria in the case of the 180-400-foot subbasin, which is subject to SIGMA, as well as adjudication requirements for the seaside basin. What the projected water budget results show is that the Monterey subbasin conditions are strongly dependent upon what happens within the adjacent subbasins. The Monterey subbasin cannot achieve sustainability alone because there's really nothing that stops the groundwater from flowing from one basin to the next. And so all of the subbasins surrounding this Monterey subbasin will also have to achieve sustainability in order for the Monterey subbasin to achieve sustainability. Future climate and recharge rates in the Monterey subbasin are actually projected to increase based on DWR's climate model. So actually the future is anticipated to be better than today with regard to recharge. However, there should be seawater, sea level rise, which could impact the amount of seawater intrusion. With regard to projected demands, they exceed the basin recharge estimates within the Marina Ord area. The estimates are in the range, the recharge estimates are in the range of about 6,800 acre feet per year. Whereas if all of the basically all of the demands were to be met by groundwater, the groundwater withdrawals would be over 9,000 acre feet per year based on the projected demands. As such, what we see is that projects and management actions will likely be required to meet project demands and achieve sustainable management criteria. some of the projects and management actions that have been identified within the GSP, specifically that focus on the Marina Org area, include continued conservation, which is basically the demand management measures that have been implemented by Marina Coast Water District and have saved a lot of water to date. Stormwater recharge management, which is also ongoing within the basin. And then potentially recycled water reuse through both landscape irrigation and indirect potable reuse. There's already projects in place that anticipate recycled reuse to landscape irrigation, but those could be potentially expanded to inject that recycled water to allow for indirect potable reuse. Also, additional monitoring wells are going to be needed to assess the potential for seawater intrusion within the basin. And then there's also several regional projects that have been identified as potential options, including winter releases from reservoirs, basically Salinas River water, that could be used for ASR, which is aquifer storage and recovery, and or direct delivery to Marina Coast Water District during the winter time. And then there's also a regional municipal supply through brackish water desalination extracted from seawater intrusion barrier that has been identified as one of the potential regional projects in the 180-400 aquifer subbasin GSP. With regard to GSP implementation, really looking at in the next year, continuing monitoring and reporting. There are annual requirements and 5-year requirements to keep the DWR updated as to the project and the implementation of the plan, as well as conditions in the basin. Continued coordination and stakeholder engagement, and then really starting projects and evaluating implementation costs. The projects really need to be refined in the next few years prior to implementation, and then implementation costs have been identified both for the plan as well as the projects. Finally, as I indicated earlier, this is an iterative process. We are at really the beginning of this process, not at the end. And that as we learn more, there'll be more and more things that are identified that need to be addressed and the plan potentially modified. And that's summary of the presentation.
Awesome, thank you. Do we have any board members who would like to ask questions? I do see Director Morton's hand and then Director Moore. But first, Director Morton.
Thank you. So I do have some questions. One of the questions I had, and thank you for your overview, and I feel like every time that you talk to us, Vera, it's a tutorial for those of us that are catching up. Thank you. So the adjudicated basins are excluded from the requirements of having a GSA. The assumption is that they are operating sustainably, correct?
Correct.
And we abut the seaside subbasin, the seaside basin, which is adjudicated.
Correct.
So if in fact we're going through this process and we find, because you showed a map where the flows are coming towards us, or there are some other changes, or we in monitoring, we find there are issues. Now what happens? Is the presumption that seaside basin doesn't need to do anything and all the corrective action has to happen by us?
No,
As
it's
our GSA. That's
it's going to be there's going to have to be coordination between both the seaside basin, the Monterey Basin, and the 180-foot aquifer subbasin. They're all connected. If one person pumps too much, it takes water from the next person. So it's going to have to be a coordinated approach and clearly a negotiation. I mean, you know, it's Everyone has concerns about the neighboring subbasin withdrawing too much water. And so it's none of us can achieve sustainability unless all of us, basically implement projects or management actions or cut back.
So that's where I'm trying to head to as understanding is, so even though the Seaside Basin doesn't have to have a GSA, doesn't have to do a plan because it's adjudicated, as to the coordination efforts, you called it projects and management actions that are required, that every sub-basin that's interconnected has to cooperate. The California law requires that, or is it simply, again, negotiation? Rem's shaking his head, yes, that is required by California law. That answers my question. Okay, so then the other question I have, I know we have a deadline, January 31st, that we give this plan to the DWR for review. What is their standard of review? Do they actually read it, say it's viable, or do they just see if it complies with a particular checklist?
No, they very much go through it, and they have the ability to either say that it meets the criteria and give you recommendations, even if it meets it, what else they would like to see, or they will find it inadequate, in which case it has to be resubmitted. So the process, and we are just seeing responses for some of the GSPs that were submitted over a year ago from DWR. They've been going through them and releasing, their responses to the different GSPs. Every few months, a few come out, and they will either approve it or not approve it. And I can't remember, but there's quite a few that have not been approved, and they've asked for modifications.
And so then, as we are tangential to other subbasins, the DWR review is kind of also looking at those crossovers.
It should be, yes. I mean, ideally, DWR looks to see if the criteria in one basin stop an adjacent basin from reaching sustainability. I mean, that is the criteria that's in the law, that you cannot create a GSP that stops an adjacent subbasin from reaching its sustainability.
And so if in fact there's a conflict that comes up and XYZ subbasin, I don't know, but somebody tangential to us, and we have a complaint that we are saying, okay, we've done our GSA, we're complying, we have all our monitoring there, we're now seeing a change in the conditions, which means we need to do some kind of projects or management actions, but either it's exacerbated by somebody's over pumping or somebody's other maintenance of their adjoining basin, or it's caused by, is that then something we go to the DWR to ask that the two subbasin management groups resolve, or is that litigation in court?
I think you would try at first, as in most, these types of cases, you would go to DWR first. I mean, they are the regulatory agency. They are looking to make sure that these plans meet the criteria and intent of SGMA. And if one of its intents is that you cannot stop another basin from reaching sustainability, I believe that you have some ability with DWR to make a case. If DWR does not rule in your favor, you of course have the ability to take it to the courts.
Okay, so I have some other questions, but I'll let some other people ask. Those were more global, and then I have some with regard to the two GSAs that are doing this and how we implement if we're in conflict, but I'll pass the platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Moore.
Thank you very much. So it's been probably 3 years since I've read the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And of course, when I read it as a non-attorney. So not right now, but if some point in the near future, Vera, Rem, or Roger could point me to the part of Sigma where that might force an adjudicated basin under a court-ordered water master, such, for example, as the Seaside Basin, to cooperate with us, to do anything if we make some kind of demand on them. I'd like to get a sense of the extent to which the law is clear versus murky and you have to resort to litigation in the courts. So when you get a chance, if you could provide the citation or point me to the logic, I would appreciate that, because I do share Director Morton's concerns. I think we know pretty well what Sigma says about cooperation with other GSAs, and we've been engaged in ongoing cooperation with the Salinas Valley Basin for some time now. So that's, at least in my mind, reasonably well established, but I don't see so well established is the coordination between a GSA agency and a GSA controlled or managed basin, and something that's under a completely different court-ordered adjudication process. And you know, the answer may be it depends on the particular adjudication, because I could imagine the possibility that one adjudication is not the same as another adjudication. All right, so that's something in the future. Don't have to answer right now. On page XXIV, Roman numeral of the executive summary, I might suggest a couple of things about multi-basin projects. Seasonal release from reservoirs, maybe you specifically say Salinas Valley groundwater basin reservoirs. And I don't, the other thing is there any aquifer storage and retrieval going on within that basin? We know, of course, what might be confusing to the reader is there is aquifer storage and retrieval going on involving the Seaside adjudicated basin and the Carmel River area. But I don't believe that that's what's intended by the use of the acronym ASR on this particular page in the executive summary. And then the other thing that maybe should be here under projects, you have regional municipal supply through brackish water under multi-basin projects, but you know, there's always the possibility of Marina Coast, as it has previously done, doing a small nation project just for the marine area. So I'm wondering if we should add to the Marina Ord area local projects the possibility of desalination in one form or another.
Let me check on the process here just to be sure. But I believe the SBB GSA has already approved this plan, and our board can certainly ask questions, but when it comes to wordsmithing, are we holding those wordsmithing thoughts now to the next version?
I would say that's probably up to partly advice from Vera and company on that score. But as she did say, this is a living plan. So if it doesn't happen now, it could happen in the next iteration of this.
Okay.
That goes to the next question for Vera. Is there an iteration schedule? How often should we be? Or is this a living plan in the sense of whenever either of the agencies sees the need for a change, it's brought forth again?
Yeah, there is in fact a very strict schedule by under Sigma. And there are annual reports that need to be submitted every year with very specific information. And then in a 5-year time frame, that's when there's a major review that occurs. But in all of those cases, there can be modifications, recommendations to the plan. So to the extent that, I mean, this plan, as has been indicated has been approved. And so the ability to wordsmith at this point in this plan would be difficult, but there are always opportunities in the future to add additional projects, review and change some language. But I think at this point, with regard to this plan, unless there is something very substantial that is a concern, the goal would be to basically keep the language as is.
Okay, I understand that. And since I'm sure EKI is hoping to continue a relationship with Marina Coast going forward, maybe for a year or 5 years, you now have notes about a couple of suggested revisions to bring forth and see what a future board has to say about them. Thank you. I'll cede my time.
Oh, thank you, Director Moore. Director Zifferman, do you have any questions?
I had two primary questions. The first one is, you've mentioned that there'll be various opportunities in the future to potentially update the plan or change the verbiage or add projects, take away projects. Is there a set schedule for that? Does the plan get reviewed and updated annually or every 2 years, or just kind of at the whims of the sustainability agencies? Like, what's kind of the updating plan for, or the plan for updating the plan?
Sarah, would
So
you
there-
like me to describe
Yeah,
it?
go
Well,
ahead.
Good evening, directors. Noel and I've worked very on this plan at KI. So for each 5 years, there is an update required for this entire groundwater sustainability plan. When you have to go over the hydrogeologic analysis, the modeling, and setting up your criteria, and the whole list of projects management actions again. However, for each year, by April, each agency needs to submit an annual report. And that report reviews data collected over the past year and compare it to the criteria you have set. And also it needs to report progress on the project and management actions that you have planned on. So in actually very soon in each year, if you have progress that you made in planning, for example, progress that you made in conceptualizing the projects, or have changed your list of projects slightly, or have developed new projects, those you can always report in the annual report. And if there's substantial changes that you want to make in the groundwater sustainability plan itself, your agency is not prevented from adopting an amendment to the GSP before the 5-year update.
Okay, thanks. So as part of that process, does it also include for the 5-year process, reopening up the plan updates to public comment and respond, and doing responses to the comment and things like that? So it's not just doesn't just come to the board, it goes out to the public again, and there's a comment period and all that. Okay, great.
Correct.
Okay, and then my next question is on page 29 of our packet, which is, I guess, the Roman numeral page 17 of the executive summary. There's a little bit about data collection. Data collected from Sigma monitoring network will be uploaded to a data management system to be established and managed by the Monterey subbasin and reported to DWR in accordance with the monitoring protocols developed for the subbasin. And I guess my question is, so my understanding there is there's going to be kind of a centralized data repository. And my question is, who has access to that repository and who can draw data from it? Can anyone in the public draw data from it easily? Does it require Freedom of Information Act, or is there sort of like proprietary information from different users that might be contained that would limit public access? Or is it just the GSA agencies that would have access? Like, what's the data management plan like for this data, and how widely available is the data?
I could also provide some information, and Patrick and Barry can chime in as well. So the plan that we're discussing currently with SUV GSA is to have our data shared with them on an online portal where the public can access the data, especially the representative monitoring sites that we have identified in the plan. And those sites are where the Sigma criterias are set at. Both the SVGSA and our agency manage our internal system of more data. For example, we manage thousands of data that were historically collected in the Salinas Valley and Fort Worth. And those are currently too many data points to upload for public user to directly access, but those are also data that could be shared if any public has interest in. And any data that's collected from our wells in the monitoring network going forward as part of the annual update, we are currently discussing the plan of uploading and refreshing that shared public data system as we go, so the public can see the most recent data from our representative monitoring network in the basin.
And is there a dedicated person or people who will be the data stewards and managers? I know it says that DWR, I guess, would be the agency responsible, but I mean, it seems like that would be a pretty big effort to like curate all the data in a usable manner. Is there like money identified for for that, and a responsible person or people?
Director Zephyrin, that's part of what we're developing in terms of moving forward with the Water Resources Department as we get this plan adopted. And just quickly to go back to some of the data will not necessarily be all public. All of the data that we're collecting is not necessarily going to be put on the site, as Tina mentioned. Not to say that it won't be public, but there are other agencies that we're going to coordinate with where there may be wells that are providing data that are private wells that are proprietary, where the information will not be accessible to the public. But in terms of how we're going to where and how we're going to keep all that data, currently we're working with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA and the two consulting groups to identify what we're going to store, how we're going to store, and then moving forward into the future, what we're going to do in terms of how as a GSA we're going to manage that data and then be able to provide access to that data. So it may be in the future that we're doing that in-house, but currently right now, as it was developed with the plan, the two consulting groups with Salinas Valley GSA and our GSA group EKI have been building those databases.
Okay, thank you.
Your questions complete, Director Zephyrin?
Yeah, those are my main questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Vice President Cortez.
Yeah, I actually just want to piggyback off Director Zephyrin because that was my kind of area of implementation plan. Seems to be a lot of monitoring and reporting and database tracking. So I appreciate Patrick Breen for giving us that update. It looks like it's still kind of a moving target, but I am interested in that. I do believe that it's important for MCWD to have their own internal database, even if it works with EKI. I think in the past we've seen that the data that we provided to the public was important for us to push certain advocacy for Marina Coast Water District and our groundwater situation. So that was my concern. I think Director Zephyrin asked really good questions about it. So I would, at least for me, would like to prioritize that when we come back in the future, if the team can really flush that out as far as the data collection, who's collecting, how it's being collected, who's responsible, and so forth. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm super grateful that we've got people watching for grants, and some of this work has been covered by the state. Mr. Masuda.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. One is that the 18400 GS plan was approved by DWR. So hopefully their success will carry over to ours, because I thought qualitatively ours was better. Patrick shakes his head yes. the other thing is if DWR doesn't approve our GS plan and we go through this iterative process with them, because they'll send a deficiency letter like they've done to several of the critically overdrafted subbasin plans. If they can't resolve it, then the matter is actually referred to the State Water Resources Control Board, and the board holds a hearing as to whether or not the subbasins should be put on probationary status, which means that then the state board has direct supervisory authority over that subbasin. So, but hopefully, based upon the 18400's plan track record, I believe that Patrick and EKI have done a very good job on our plan, and hopefully it'll go, get approved. The 18400, I just looked it up. They submitted it in January 2020. They got an approval letter on June 3rd of 2021. So it's it's a 1.5 year process. So I guess just so the board knows, it's not like the next month we're going to either get a deficiency letter or approval. So, and you have to remember they had I think 53 plans for the critically overdrafted subbasins, which I think were 21 or so. And for this next group, I don't know, Vera or Tina, do you know, is it like 200 or something? So they have a lot of work to do. So
Wow.
that's all I had. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I was snickering just a little bit because it's a collaboration, not a competition. So I'm glad that the 18400 plan was accepted, and we'll see what happens with this one. It almost seems like we need to have a workshop to update all of us on the board of what all has been going on with the Sigma process and then the next steps. So I'm just excited that everybody's talking about sustainability on the water. Director Morton, are you ready? Or you were complete, Mr. Masuda? Your comment?
Yes, I'm complete.
Okay, and then Director Morton.
So thank you. So what I'm anticipating then, I get that the GSA is going to have its own operating budget, it's going to have its own CIP, it's going to have its own agendas. So how I'm understanding this, I'm trying to make sure, is that in the next 5 years, one of the very first thing that's happening is, I'm reading page 37, ES 10, the plan implementation is that all these collection, monitoring, reporting, that we're improving all of our knowledge about the condition of our basins and how they interrelate by implementing these. So what I'm asking is then how this comes forward would be this: each year there'd be a work plan, or each 6 months there's a work plan, a lot of it internal, but some of it may come to the board if it needs funding. Is that a correct
Yes.
understanding?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the question I have, this is the part is you have 2 GSAs, you've got one plan, and at page 37, you have how we're going to implement it. And then I'm seeing, well, it says implementing projects and management actions, preparing grant applications, developing funding strategies. Okay. So the question that I have is that if in fact we're not altering the plan, but we're implementing the plan as an agency. So as we implement this plan as an agency and we decide our independent actions, we don't need to go to the other GSA group and get approval. As long as it's within our basin and a plan, a project or an implementation that is solely within the scope of our service areas, the scope of our basin, the scope of our budget, we can just go forward.
Within the scope of our management area within the GSP.
That's
Correct.
the language I'm looking for. Scope of our management area. Thank you for my help there, Patrick. So then we can just go forward. And this framework is just telling us the objectives collectively, but we decide each little point based on meeting those collective objectives, which are to avoid harm, which are all delineated. Okay, so that part I understand, but then I'm reading page 4 of our staff summary, and it says multi-sub-basin projects, and there's listed 1, 2, 3 of them with little bullets, and it says the last sentence of the paragraph above the bullet point says these multi-sub-basin projects include. Are these mandatory, or are these just like placeholders that will think about it, talk about it? But again, this would go through then actual approvals by each GSA and any other impacted basin oversight.
Correct, and possibly CEQA and every other.
Right.
title that's required.
So Patrick, that's my next exact question I have written down. That we're going to do a project or an implementation, a correction, if it rises to the level of a project, that action will have a CEQA report and will have to meet the CEQA requirements. And so there is also the ability for the public, other agencies to come in and weigh in that CEQA review, if it's an EIR or a negative DAC, whatever way it is, that comments would be solicited.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Then the only thing that I'm really sitting here struggling with is the equality of power between the two GSAs and how this document, if it doesn't, just tell me it doesn't, resolves an impasse. We're not competing. We're not in the different world that we just covered, that examined that thoroughly, but we're in the same world, in the same plan, but perhaps we don't think that the proposed action, either Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency says, Marina, your cure for this defect is stupid, and we think it should be done this way, or vice versa. Or we say, this is $100 billion, you come up with 50 billion and we'll come up with 50 billion. And they say, no, you should pay 75 billion. How do those things get resolved in this structure and this plan? Is that, I haven't read the whole thing. I've read the executive summary. I've been through tutorials on certain chapters. Is that addressed, or how does coordination work? Is there a code section on coordination, Mr. Masuda, that I should be reading? Where
Yeah,
are
I mean, no, I mean, it's like what Vera said at the beginning. We need to have a cooperative, good faith working relationship with the 18400 and the Seaside Subbasin. And we also have, they're in our subbasin, the Coral del Tierra area, although I think they have this geographic problem that, all their water goes to the river, and it's not their fault. It's the way the hills around, mountains around them were formed. So, I mean, we have to work with a lot of people. The push comes to shove is if we think a multi-basin project would be beneficial to us, but then another, like the 18400, they don't want it, and that's the problem. I think Marina Coast has the ability, because it has this right to recapture, recycle water. That's one element that a lot of the other agencies don't have, and so that's one of the cards we have. And a lot of the agencies have been looking at one of the multi-basin projects, which is actually capturing winter flows off the Salinas River. I mean, that's really, flood flows off of rivers now is the big projects that everybody is looking at that actually has a river. In fact, the state board calls it FloodMAR. See, flood management and aquifer recharge. That's what it stands for. So they actually have a special permitting water rights permitting processes to implement flood projects. And that hasn't really been looked at, but it is a multi-basin project proposal in the 18400 and in our Monterey subbase.
Yeah. Gail, to answer the question, we have a coordinating MOU on the 18400. So we already have a structure outside the plan for the two entities to interact, and Donna and I and staff on both sides have started to discuss a similar MOU as it relates to the Corral de Tierra and the Marina Org. So
And that's vacant in my knowledge bank because, and the reason I'm asking these questions obviously is because the plan identifies all the issues with regard to water, but is silent as to the political pressures, to the cost allocations. It's silent in so many aspects.
But it has to be.
It appears not to have teeth.
Right, it has to be. It's a plan, right?
I understand, and I'm just looking for where is the missing component. So
yeah.
Thank you for letting me belabor these points, but they're driving me nuts.
Okay.
And Mr. Breen, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, Sigma contemplates this very issue, and they have in the code, it cites coordination agreements between adjacent basins. We have a coordination agreement with the 18400 that also contemplates how we proceeded with the plan for the Monterey subbasin in terms of clarifying that the Corral area is to be managed by the Salinas Valley Basin and the Marina Ord area is to be managed by the Marina Ord areas. It contemplates projects as for each basin being their own and things of that nature. And it also contemplates the coordination committee that we used to agendize, that you're a member of, to raise issues to the electeds levels to hopefully resolve any of those issues. And alluded to earlier, obviously we have all of our other legal remedies if we cannot come to agreement with those stages.
Okay. Thank you. I think that answers most of my questions. It's, I appreciate the effort. I have scribbled all over this, and if I come up with looking at it something else, I'll raise my hand. I'm ready to go to the public. Thank you.
Yay. Yeah, it's exciting and it's complicated and it's so new. It's just really a new thing to go from first come, first serve to how do we make this last forever? All right, so just to check in, right now we're still in our public hearing. We've completed the portion of the presentation and the board asking questions. My normal procedure then would have a motion before the board and then go to the public comment portion. Director Morton?
Yeah, because it's a public hearing, I would think that we should take public comment first, and that may shape our motion. So thank you if we can procedurally go that.
Yeah, that's the way I would recommend we have public comment next.
We'll have public comment then, and then we'll have further discussion by the board, eventually a motion, and then we don't need to have a second public comment, do we, on the motion?
No.
Okay. All right, then. Good enough. I get it. So we'll now open this public hearing to the public comments. People who are in our attendance, attendees list, Mr. Nilsson, this is the appropriate time. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. I'm Dr. Glenn Nelson, the new Vice President for Administration and Finance at CSU Monterey. I'm also new to the area, and I'm excited to be partnering with you, both the board and your staff, as we move forward in the coming months. I'm here tonight to mention what I believe was a simple oversight. The university submitted comments on October 29th, 2021, and we received an acknowledgement of our letter. However, we noticed that our comments were not included in the summary table, nor was the letter included in the agenda packets with the other written submissions. I simply respectfully request that you amend the agenda packet to add our letter to reflect our comments. I just want to thank you also for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in attendees list wishing to comment? I see no Zoom hands going up. So we'll return to staff. Would you mind addressing that comment about the comment letter?
Yes, President Schreiner. Yes, we did receive the letter. It was acknowledged, and Dr. Nelson is correct. We caught the oversight last week. It has been forwarded on to EKI for incorporation into the submittal that will accompany DWR. We don't consider many of the comments to be of such significance to alter the plan in major fashions, but we are going to include the letter and our responses as we have with every other comment with our submission to DWR. And we apologize for the oversight.
Okay, thank you for managing so well. All right, any further discussion on the part of the board members?
Move approval of resolution 2022-GSA 01 as characterized by staff, including the addition of the letter from CSUMB.
I will second, and to conclude the public hearing.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I heard 2 seconds, I believe.
I'll give it to Director Morton.
Checking in with the attorney, does the public hearing get closed before the vote or after the vote? All right, I don't hear anything. How about Mr. Schertzinger, do you know?
What was the question, Jan? I apologize.
Does the public hearing need to be closed before the vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, please close the public hearing and then conduct the vote.
Okay, the public hearing for the Monterey Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan is now closed. And now we have a motion and a vote, a second before the board. Please may I have a roll call vote.
Director Moore,
Yes.
Director Morton,
Yes.
Director Zepperman,
Yes.
Vice President Cortez,
Yes.
and President Schreiner.
Yes. Awesome, thank you. On that. Thank you so much, EKI, Ms. Wang and Ms. Nelson for participating, and apologies to CSUMB for the oversight. So the next thing I have in this packet is item 7, which is a return to the Marina Coast Water District matters. This is a workshop. We're to receive a presentation on the draft recycled water rate study.
Good evening, President Schreiner and members of the board. Kelly Cadiente, Director of Administrative Services, and I'm here to introduce Kevin Kostick from Raftellus. Raftellus has been working on our recycled water rate study, and he's going to give the first presentation for our workshop 1. So, okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, President Schreiner and fellow directors, members of the public that might be joining, and staff. I'm Kevin Kostick from Raftellus. I'm the project manager who've been working with Kelly and others for a better part of a year now to get to this point. And we do have our first presentation for you tonight. If we can go to the next slide. A couple more introductions for team members that aren't joining me tonight, and a project overview. Then we'll briefly touch on our rate study process. The bulk of the presentation will be to show our buildup of recycled water system costs, and then we'll talk about our next steps for the study. Steve Gagnon who's not with us tonight, is our project director. Steve's been doing rates in California for the better part of 20 years, is an engineer and has been part of our team for about 8 years now. As I mentioned, I'm the project manager, and then Joe Collins, who's been living in the data, in the weeds with Kelly's numbers, building out a financial plan and rate model. Next slide, please. The study objectives that we had or do have are to develop a long-range financial plan for the recycled water system. You're obviously starting from scratch, and we want to build up a sustainable plan for that utility enterprise to become self-sufficient in the long term. We are going to develop recycled water rates and charges for these customers, future customers, both those current customers that will be converting and future customers that may be contractual. We're going to document the whole study in a study report, no different than what you do for your water and sewer services. And another objective that we have in the study is to benchmark our water system costs and our proposed rates against peer agencies with similar services. Project background. So you have this new system that you're finishing up the distribution portion of. It's a relatively new enterprise as part of the district. What does it consist of? Well, you're purchasing recycled water from M1W Monterey 1 treatment facilities that's augmenting potable demand, offsetting potable demand, and reducing groundwater pumping in the long term. First phase was transmission and storage, which is complete. And then your second phase is building out your distribution pipelines to pre-plumb customers with recycled water service available this calendar year. And as I mentioned, in the interim or the short term to medium term, we're talking about a conversion of existing irrigators, and then down the road, some future contractual users. So rate study overview. Next slide, please. These are kind of our 5 primary steps that we conduct in a rate study. So the first is a rate setting framework. We talk about financial goals and policies and pricing objectives. We know you have a reserve policy on the and sewer side of the house. Step 2, the financial plan. So really that's a buildup of costs. So identifying our total system costs, both operating, capital, debt service, and building out a multi-year cash flow so that we can build out a sustainable financial plan for the recycled water enterprise. The third step is our rate design. So that's our cost allocations and a cost of service analysis, and then calculating actual fixed and variable rates and conducting a customer impact analysis, especially for those users that are current irrigators that would be switching to a new rate structure or a new rate schedule rather. The fourth step, or 4 and 5, really are the substantive and the procedural requirements of Proposition 218, which you're probably familiar with. So the substantive side, we're going to develop a study report to be your administrative record and have it reviewed by legal counsel. And then procedurally, we need to notice all of our district customers and conduct a public hearing for rate adoption. So the key legislation, again, no different than what you may have seen on the potable side before. We've got cost of service requirements, Prop 218 relating to our retail customers, Prop 26, which relates to things like wholesale water customers, impact fees, etc. But then we also have water conservation as a constitutional mandate, and we really need to harmonize those two things, harmonizing between cost of service and between conservation. And recycled water kind of holds a special place between the potable side and the recycled side, because there are direct and indirect benefits to the potable side of the house. So what is cost of service? It's a technical analysis that allows us to match the rates that we charge with the cost of serving different user groups. So we look at all of your costs. We ask ourselves, what's the function or what's the purpose of that expense? What function does it serve? But then depending on the function that it serves, it's distributed to one or more of our water system components. And then those components get recovered from either fixed or variable charges. And we have a little animation on the next slide. And if you advance it, I think the animation might work. There we go. So we take this big bucket of revenue requirements. That's our jargony way of saying what are our total costs, operating capital, debt service, reserve funding. And we allocate those. Again, we functionalize them and say what portion is for supply, what's for our base or average daily demand delivery costs, what's for conservation. And then working from the right side, what's for customer service, the meter maintenance that would be recovered from the fixed charge. And then that green bucket in the middle, those are our extra capacity costs. And it's a common practice that we recover a portion of those costs, some on the volumetric rate, some on the fixed. And then the next step in a uniform rate structure, we'd simply sum up those cost components that relate to a commodity rate. So supply, delivery, extra capacity, and conservation, and that yields our total volumetric rate. So that's the kind of the macro sense of the technical analysis. If we go to the next slide, thank you. So rate design approach. On the recycled water front, our commodity rates for those services are almost always a uniform structure, and that's what we're proposing, what we'll bring back to you in February. We're talking about outdoor use only, with a wide variation in the volume of use between different customers, different sizes and needs. One exception to uniform rates for recycled water would be something like a water budget rate structure, where you're identifying the efficient demands serving that for a meter that's serving a given area or given parcel. And then for the fixed charges, a common approach is to simply apply your potable fixed charge and basically net that out of the total cost that you need to recover from your recycled water users. But in our discussions with staff, what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate a separate, unique fixed charge for your recycled water users. Because it's a new system and because we're converting folks over time, there is some complications there. And so that's something that we're working through modeling currently, and we hope to have complete and be able to show you when we show rates in February. So we're going to move to our actual costs. We have a pretty good amount of detail on our 4 primary cost components. And those would be first treatment. So that's the cost to produce recycled water at M1W facilities. Then we have our transmission costs. So that's the conveyance between treatment facilities and your storage and distribution. And then the actual distribution system costs, and then overhead. So a fair share of your internal indirect and administrative costs. So those are our 4 primary cost components. So the first one here is treatment. What we're showing is the detail on the O&M costs at the treatment facilities. We have an annual renewal reserve, some debt service, and then a one-time reserve funding for the SRF share. And then we're showing our forecast as well over the next 5 years through fiscal year 2026. Some of the assumptions you see over there on the right, which is 3% annual increase assumption on the O&M. And then our debt service shares based on the relative proportion of water that Marina Coast takes relative to what's being produced at the treatment facilities. Next slide. Transmission costs similarly, got a few notes there. SRF loan 1, second loan 2015 bonds. You see the subtotals there on the debt service, building up to about $800,000 in fiscal year 23. Similar to the treatment facilities, about a $300,000 debt service reserve, one-time reserve that's funded. And then you have some O&M, about $50,000 or so in O&M, but there's a healthy portion, 75% of that, that's reimbursed from M1W for their share of the O&M for existing pipeline facilities. So all in about 1.1 million we're projecting in this coming fiscal year for transmission, and it again bumped up because of that debt service reserve in the first year, so about $800,000 in future years. And then we have our distribution costs. Same flow here. We've got our notes, SRF, and then a loan for a total debt service of about $335,000, a one-time debt service reserve funding in the first year, and then the estimates that were provided on your internal that's Marina Coast O&M on the distribution system. So about $675,000 per year once we're in fiscal year 24-25. And then lastly, we effectively reworked. We took your administrative and overhead allocation and said, what if we worked in the recycled water enterprise with the same methodology? Take out to be about 3% of your indirect or your administrative overhead allocation for administration, laboratory, engineering, and water resource department costs. And that 3% share will show how we shake out in the next slide.
Sure.
So this brings it all together. Treatment, transmission, distribution, and overhead. Our fiscal year 2022, that's our current fiscal year, about 4.2 million. Because we have those kind of one-time debt service reserves in fiscal year 23, you see that jump to about 4.9 million and then actually come down in future years slightly. About 4.4 to 4.5 million is our estimate in total recycled water system costs. That's all in. We can go to the next slide. So that's, that ends up being our numerator, right? So that's our big bucket cost. And then on what's the denominator side? So we have existing retail customers, conversions beginning this fiscal year. We have projections through fiscal year 2026 of those existing irrigators that would convert. That translates into about 131 acre feet of water use per year. Then we have the golf course that's estimated about 457 acre feet per year, beginning again this fiscal year. We have an existing contract with CSUMB. That's 87 acre feet per year in 2022. Then the balance between your full take from the treatment facilities, which is 1,427 acre feet, would be met or would be taken rather by future contracted customers, contractual customers, and the district's potable utilities for their benefit and their use. So translating that prior slide into annual units of service, this table, the top portion simply shows the volume in our billing units, 100 cubic feet, and then the bottom shows it in acre feet. So again, retail and golf course, retail being conversions of existing retail irrigators, about 480 acre feet expected, and the university at 87. And then the balance, and until we have contracted customers, the balance of about 860 acre feet per year for the district's potable utility use. So we are proposing or will propose a multi-year rate adoption and rate schedule for you. There's some things we need to consider, how we want to adopt those future year rate increases. So one would be to identify a financial plan and say we have X% change in annual expenses each year, and we should simply account for those expenses, use that as our proposed adjustment each fiscal year. The second would be to have an annual adjustment that's based on CPI, and it's effectively a pass-through of inflation. And then the third would be to apply the same revenue adjustment that you would on your potable utilities. Mindful that most, I think all but two of the customers that we're talking about on the retail front are in the ORD service area. And I think the first option makes the most sense to identify kind of what's necessary as far as cost escalation for our O&M, debt service, and any future reserve funding. So that's something we'll also bring back to you as part of our proposal at a future workshop. And that second bullet is important, which is we do need to think about any future reserve funding. So we do have we've got some debt service reserves that are baked in. They're required as part of agreements, but there's also requirements for operating expenses, just working capital for paying bills. There may be a use to have some modest capital reserve, mindful that it's a new system. I don't think we have some large R&R program out there. And then there's always emergency, right? What happens if there's a service disruption, natural disaster, that kind of thing. So thinking through, should we mirror the reserve policy that you have on your potable utilities, or should we try and flesh out something that might be more tailored for the recycled water enterprise? So the next steps for us is to finish modeling our rates. We've got the cost analysis well underway, cost of service analysis well underway, but we're modeling those unique fixed charges, come up with a multi-year rate schedule and proposal there, and then obviously developing a rate study report that would serve to initiate the 218 procedures, and then a public hearing in the spring. And I think, in fact, our last slide has some specificity on the timeline. So the rate setting framework that I've mentioned a bit tonight, and we've discussed a bit with staff in the past, and we'll continue to discuss the financial plan, which the model has been completed, rate design, which we have in the works. And again, looking to come back to you February 22nd for preliminary rates. March 21st is when we would expect to have come back for rate authorization. That's assuming what we show you in February is agreeable, and we move forward with a rate proposal. And then noticing customers after that March 21st authorization meeting for a public hearing May 16th. And that is the last slide that I have, and concludes my presentation, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you. And I would love to have this sent out to the board if it's possible. It's always easier for me to go over the numbers in a more
Absolutely.
methodical manner. All right, so questions from the board. Was it Director Morton? Were you first?
I don't have to be first, but I can go. So going back, basically you're coming up with this number. I understand the structure of you're trying to figure out what it's going to cost, I think over a 5-year period. You're figuring that all out. Then you're dividing that by a denominator, which you've given us to try to figure out how to pay for that. But did I read your slide correctly that the project, the cost does not include any replacement? So we're not building up any CIP reserves for if something has a 5-year life cycle, a 10-year life cycle, a 20-year life cycle. Are we able to charge in our rate structure each year that additional cost? Depreciation, basically.
We are, you correctly picked up on Kevin's line. We have yet to decide what that R&R, the renewal replacement.
Oh, that's what you guys call it. Okay.
Yeah. I was talking, but I was muted because I heard the acronym go by and I was like, renewal replacement.
Yeah, I'm
sorry. I didn't get it out there. It's okay. But Kevin's point is the system's very new. We're coming up online. So really we don't want to cause rate shock because, funding $4.4 million is a lot. So we can tier in renewal and replacement to bring us up to normal operating, which is going to be probably in the first 5 to 10 years.
So that's the question. When you're talking about that built-in over, is it 3%? Is it the cost of living index? Are you tying it to some index? What are you tying it to?
Yeah.
So when you go in and maybe year 1, year 2, you don't have any renewal and replacement. But when you're putting this forward and you're talking about a 218 process, you're putting year 1, year 2, year 3, 4, and 5 for the vote. And so that renewal and replacement might come in year 4 or year 5. We would decide as a board, basically, is what is prudent with some
Yes.
some looking at this. Okay, thank you for your help.
All right, Director Moore.
Yeah, so on one of your slides, you showed the different buckets, one of which was conservation, and you indicated that that was put into the volumetric part of the rate rather than the fixed monthly part of the rate. Can you give me a little explanation as to why you've characterized that as volumetric as opposed to fixed? Because I'm pretty sure we don't pay Paul Lord any more or any less, depending on how much water our ratepayers use.
So I should have been clear that that animation was illustrative purposes only. It's really about a potable water utility, and our proposal for the recycled water side would to not have, we actually don't have that conservation bucket. That was illustration only. But your point, I can answer that question. The conservation costs, we put it in as rate practitioners, we generally put that into a volumetric component because what it does is it adds to the price signal on the commodity rate, especially when we're talking about tiered rates. So just from a, from a price signaling and a kind of rate evolution standpoint, the conservation costs are almost always recovered through the volumetric or the commodity rate of a customer's bill so that it includes that price signal.
So we know that, number one, we know that there's a degree of judgment call as to how much of your cost to put on the fixed monthly charge and how much to put on volumetric charges. We also know that a lot of our costs actually are fixed as opposed to volumetric. But then if you don't put enough on the volumetric, as you say, you've got little price signaling to your customers to encourage conservation. However, my understanding is there've been some, in the recent decades, some court challenges to the use of price tiers on the volumetric side. Does characterizing conservation as volumetric survive? Has that survived those court challenges?
I don't know of any challenge to a structure that recovers a specific cost component a specific way. Generally, the challenge happens when the unit rate itself cannot be explained as cost-based. So
Okay.
where the cost itself isn't derived from, a good example is extra capacity or peaking costs. So what we do is we actually look at the demand patterns of each customer class, each tier within a customer class to say, how do people use water in a maximum period versus an average period? So we derive a peaking unit or a peaking factor to derive a unit cost. And where people get challenged is when they make a judgment on saying, I think tier 2 should be 2 times the peak of tier 1 or twice the conservation of tier 1 or something of that nature.
So a follow-up, with respect to what did you use when you calculated the cost of the water from Pure Water Monterey? Was that based on 600 acre feet or 1427 acre feet?
1427.
Okay. Is there, we know that it's unlikely that in the first or second year, we're actually going to call for 1427, unless something moves very quickly politically on a variety of fronts. Are any of those Monterey One water costs fixed, whether we take 1427 or 600?
Kelly, I think I'd have to defer this one to you.
If you're trying to answer
the longest mute button ever.
I apologize. I'm talking away. No one can hear. No, if we took 600 or if that's what we're going to get, then the percentage would change and the allocation would be based on 600 acre feet, if that's going to be the maximum, or 1427.
So I think we missed the answer. So Tom, the question is volumetrically, if we take 500 of the 1427, we take 800 of the 1427, we're still going to pay our percentage share of the AWT, regardless of the amount that we take.
Not of the O&M,
Not of the the O&M number changes.
right? But
Okay,
the debt
so,
service, those portions, the fixed costs would not.
all right, so they're within the cost that we're ultimately going to have to pay to Monterey One Water are some fixed charges like debt service, and then some variable charges like O&M.
Correct.
Okay. So I was just doing some quick calculations. If that full 3.7 million, whatever it was, sorry, there it is. Yeah, 3.7 million cost, and we're only taking 600 acre feet. That's what they bill us. That's $6,166 per acre foot, which is pretty high. If we're taking 1427, it's much lower. It's below $3,000 an acre foot, which is more in line with some of our potable water rates.
Right, the O&M costs are based on 1427. And then the debt service is fixed, but based on 1427 instead of full 600. Whatever our max, our capacity is, it's going to be either 1427 based on 1427 or a 600. So that all of those costs are based on 1427. So if we took 600, it'd be a lot less.
Okay, well, that's, yeah. It would be interesting to know, at least for the initial year or two, because it's going to take us a while to get beyond the 600 likely.
I don't think so, Tom.
Oh, you think it's going to happen faster?
I do, sir.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing, because that denominator is pretty important to what the actual cost of the water is going to be.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Jan, are you muted?
It disappeared.
She disappeared. Her cat was dancing in front of the screen.
Herbert, you're up. I mean, Vice President Cortez.
Sure, okay. So I think we had Director Matt Sefferman. Your hand's raised. Do you have some questions for?
Thanks, Vice President Cortez. I did have some questions. So for just, I guess, more general overview about how many, kind of just general order of magnitude, recycled water users are we planning to have? Is it going to be on the order of like 10 or 100, somewhere in between, more than that?
Are you in
I guess
total?
Yeah,
Or
I mean, so my impression of the recycled water program is that the district is mostly supplying large water users. I'm wondering like how many accounts are we projecting to have with recycled water use?
Kevin, do you have the model number, or do you want me to wax poetic about Seaside and all their development?
No,
Just kind of a swag would be fine with me.
So I've actually got the demand forecast up. I think that's accurate. 60. I would want to double check this, but I see 69 retail users that we expect to convert in the first 5 years. Does that sound?
Depends. Well, it depends, right? So 69 is what we have currently plumbed for residential and other. That's the 131. I think though, Director Zefferman, Seaside's requiring it for all development. So say the Campus Town project, that's 1,400 homes. They're all going to have recycled water connections. So
I see.
we're talking thousands as as the ORD area develops. I mean, and that's what Flora and MCWD
All right.
contemplated when we developed the project with M1 Water.
Okay, so
And-
new
and-
development in Seaside. I'm just sorry. I'm just trying to get a handle of it. So new development in Seaside, residential users will meter 1,400 or and change or so individual users for recycled water. And then in existing development, we're going to convert the large users to recycled water. Is that?
So we have the current enclave development plus others that are already plumbed
Right.
for recycled water. We need to get the state board to give us permission to let them have it. So that's
Okay.
something we're dealing with right now. But as Seaside develops, Seaside's requiring it for all future development. So as those developments come online, they will have recycled water.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so for cost centers, is this going to be separate cost centers for different, are we gonna have a split wards cost center and Central Marina, or is it all gonna be one? Is it gonna be separate than our recycled water and our normal cost centers? Is it gonna be a completely separate cost center? Or is it gonna be two separate cost centers, or just rolled into our current cost centers as far as
It'll be a
MCWD?
separate cost center.
Okay, just one separate cost center for recycled water. So it'd be the same, presumably the same rates for everyone in our district, in our service area.
Yes.
Okay. And it will also be part of the same billing.
Correct. They'll be on their
Okay.
monthly bill.
And so for some people that this is going to replace their non-recycled water service. So if someone's currently using non-recycled water for landscaping, then potentially they're going to have recycled water replacing it. So that would decrease. So they would decrease their normal water rates in theory.
It would decrease their potable demand. So their potable water,
Right.
the amount used would come down, but they're going to offset with recycled water.
Right. But they would have the same, I mean, they'd have the same kind of main, or the size of pipe going into them of our normal water would be the same, right? So they would pay the same infrastructure cost for the.
It depends. So generally, I would imagine, and I'm spinning a little bit free on this one.
Right.
You're going to have a smaller service connection because the house, if it has a fire system, it requires a much larger service connection because of the secondary system that it's serving. So if you're just serving outdoor water use, you're probably not going to be in anything over 3/4 inch in terms of a meter. So the meter capacity charges and that stuff should be, depending on the house size, depending on
Right.
the amount of fixtures, all that stuff. But it should
Okay.
be much smaller.
Okay.
or
And
smaller.
so for existing meters, then would the district replace meters then for their potable water?
No. The meters that are in the ground right now are sized to the fire demand of the new home.
Okay. For homes that have fire, my home.
Unlike your home, but at the same time, we're not digging up your street at the moment, Director
Yeah,
Zefferman, to
fair
bring
enough.
recycle water.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know that was a lot of internal MCWD stuff. So, and then I think that's all my questions. Oh yeah. And so in your presentation, you discussed complications with the timing. Is that just the complication you're discussing? Just like some people are going to come online sooner than others, and so how do you kind of average over,
Right.
all the users as you come in, and like how to do that fairly, so you're not just hammering the
That's
first people to
correct.
get connected. Okay.
Right,
Yeah, that's
right. And so that's some of the kind of the head scratching philosophical type stuff we're going through with deriving the fixed charge, because as you mentioned, we're looking at multiple years for a rate adoption. We've got cost today, but we're ramping up from basically one customer to 100 over a 5+ year period. And so yeah, we need to bridge that.
Yeah.
Fairly.
And how flexible can the district be on because presumably you're going to be spending money up front, but not if you're kind of smoothing it. Does the district have legally, can it kind of cover that gap as you move through this first few years of implementation? Is that something that's part of to be determined?
Well, I'd say I heard the word legal, and so I don't want to, that always
Yeah,
scares
fair.
me. So I'm going to defer
Fair.
that to the district attorney. But yes, the assumption is if we're taking our full share of water, and knowing we only have a fraction of customers that will be contracted and convert through that horizon, that the difference is taken by the potable water utilities. And so I wouldn't necessarily think of it as, they're not just funding the gap, but you're taking that difference, right? The water itself.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing the study and hearing more about it.
Definitely. And thank you, Vice President Cortez, for covering for me there for a moment. I thought Director Moore might go on a little bit more, but I think you're next with the hand up, Vice President Cortez.
No worries. It's part of being vice president, jumping in. So no worries. My question was about the reserve fund. I think I might have missed if we were actually going to implement a reserve fund in the model. So I just wanted to get some information on that.
Yeah, so so that's something that we want to keep discussing with staff. I think we do need to think about having something there. I think that something is between nothing and what you are doing on your potable utility side. And I think there are some distinctions on this new recycled water system that we want to be cognizant of. And I think was alluded to that we don't want to create rate shock simply for putting money in the savings account. And we want to get to a good policy for you over time, mindful that we're starting from zero. And so that's something we're going to discuss and bring back to you as a proposal next meeting as well.
Great. No, I appreciate that. I just want to just remind some fellow board members that in the last rate study, when this conversation of the reserve fund occurred, not for, of course, recycled water, that discussion about what we actually should be saving came up. And in the public comment, I do remember that the public was kind of adverse, I would say, to us increasing our savings and our reserve. So I think it's important for us to think about is institutionalizing our reserve so that the public understands that this is part of a kind of a long-term process. And so as we continue doing rate studies in the future, that reserve is part of a strategic plan long-term. So I totally understand. I know it needs further discussion, but I just wanted to share that with the board about how important that is when we get to the rate study and the public when it's very sensitive regarding the rate, see reserve as a way to kind of lower the rates. And so it's important for us to include that from the onset.
Thank you. And Director Moore?
Yes, so two issues. One, on Vice President Cortez just had to say, the decision that we have to make in front of the public with respect to reserves, certainly informed by the public. Many of our ratepayers are on small fixed incomes and may not want to see us increase their rates in order to put away money in reserves to be able to replace this, to have the cash on hand or a good chunk of the cash on hand to replace infrastructure in the future when it needs replacing. And they may argue that, hey, just borrow the money 10 years from now for that project when you need to replace it. But one of the things we are likely to face, maybe even in this rate-making process, is trying to look into the future in the sense that we have been seeing inflation caused by the pandemic of a fairly substantial nature happening now. And we know that the Federal Reserve is giving some serious consideration to raising interest rates, which would mean, putting away money now is kind of cheap. Wait 10 years to borrow money. Well, if a good bond deal 10 years from now is 10% a year, that's pretty bad compared to bond money that could be borrowed now or money that we could put away. So we're going to have to struggle with that. I just wanted to reiterate a little bit and get a confirmation. So the current plan is that we have somewhere in the order of 60 so-called retail customers, but these are not single-family homes. These are schools, these are cities with parks and so forth, where the irrigation system to which we are going to provide recycled water is under competent control of some professional, and that we do not yet have the authority from the state to deliver recycled water to any single-family home, and that we are not proposing to do that, with the exception of what our general manager described about future plans of the city of Seaside. So when it comes to what the current 60 or so retail customers who will be getting, they do have a potable meter or maybe multiple potable meters on which they're paying. And it's probably unlikely, and I'll let General Manager Scherzinger weigh in on this, it's probably unlikely that we're going to be changing out their current potable meter for a smaller potable meter, thus reducing their potable water meter charge. But they are going to get a new recycled water meter. Well, they're going to get a meter for recycled water with a separate recycled water charge.
Yes.
Fixed charge, fixed monthly charge.
So two pieces. So first, I'd like to respond to the reserves issue. I want to remind the board that in the 21-22 budget, our reserves were underfunded by roughly $19 million. So just keep that in your thought lexicon as we're moving forward. We will the staff and I are going to start working to try to close that, to try to meet our current policy objectives. And we'll use those policy objectives to inform our rate making for the recycled water system. Director Moore, to your point, we will convert those meters as those systems. So the meter won't come out of the ground. It won't change. It won't do anything. It's just going to change in our system from blue to purple as we bring those networks online. To your point about single family homes, the district is actively engaged right now. We have Harris and Associates under contract working with the Regional Water Quality Board to develop the permit network or the permit guidelines by which we will assign the control authority to those blocks of recycled water residential customers, to either their HOA or to their to whatever association is left behind by the developer. So we're actively working on that right now.
So for those 60 current customers, right now, they've got a meter that's doing their irrigation. They're paying a meter charge to us for that.
Yes.
That meter's staying in the ground. They're going to get a new meter charge based on all these calculations.
Yes.
Which could be higher, could be lower than that current meter charge.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions then from the board members? I don't see any hands going up. So we'll go on out to the public. It looks like there's not a lot of a motion to make. If there's anyone in the attendees list who would like to make a public comment, would you please raise your Zoom hand? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. Bringing it back to the board. Any further discussion? I don't see any hands there. Do we need a motion to receive?
No, ma'am.
All right, then. I really do look forward to seeing that presentation via email. Appreciate that. And
It's already there.
It's already
It's already
received.
in your inbox.
Saw it. Thank you, Ms. Brizo.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, and thank you for your time this evening, Raftelis. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name.
Kevin, that's all right. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you all for your time.
Good night, Kevin. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
All right, that brings us to agenda item 8. This is our consent calendar. Does any director wish to approve them? I don't see any hands going up right there. Any member of the public wish to pull anything of 8A through D? Please raise your Zoom hand if you do. All right, I don't see anybody raising their hand, so.
Move approval of consent.
Thank you, Director Moore.
Second.
Thank you, Director Morton. And any further discussion? I don't see any hands, so roll call vote, please.
Director Morton,
Yes.
Director Zepperman,
Yes.
Director Moore,
Yes.
Vice President Cortez,
Yes.
and President Schreiner.
Yes, that's unanimous. The full consent calendar. Thank you, everyone. It takes us to number 9. A was pulled, so we're going to jump to, we have a 9B, right? Yes, a 9B, this is to consider adopting resolution 2022-03 to authorize a CIP budget adjustment. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, President Schreiner. Yes, item 9B is to adopt resolution number 2022-03 to authorize a CIP budget adjustment to cover, to reimburse the city of Marina for work that was done on Flower Circle during their pavement operations. When they were out there, they had their contractor out paving those roads. They were breaking one of our older transite lines kind of continuously in that area. And we don't know if it was due to the poor compaction underneath it or just an aggressive operator. But when staff investigated it, it became apparent that it might be advantageous for the district to replace the remaining portion of the water service in that area and to also install a couple valves and a new hydrant for that area, given that it was a 4-inch line that was older and approaching its end of its useful life. So we made an agreement with the city to cover those expenses, and then with a reimbursement on an emergency basis. Since we had the road wide open, there was not going to be the need for the district, if we came back later, to remove and replace the asphalt and have all the mobilization costs that would be associated. And so what this item is asking is to cover that reimbursement. We had a CIP project for a portion of Crescent Avenue pipeline that was done with under the RUAP project. It wasn't a recycled water line, but it was placed into that project scope, and it was done underneath the budgeted amount. They had a budget of $196,000, and it only cost the district $145,000, and so there was budget remaining to cover this reimbursement. And so with that, I will take any questions on this item. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and the report. Any questions, Director Morton?
Okay, so we're paying for the pipe, we're paying for the work, the things that happen. Are you saying we're also paying for the street repair?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I misunderstood you because I'm going to object. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good question. Director Zepperman? Oh, yes.
I think that I think I understand now after Director Morton's question. So
Okay.
I'm going to withdraw mine.
Thank you. Did you have another one, Director Morton? I see your hand.
No, I was going to move approval that we pay for our pipe replacement, the modification to our CIP budget.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Let's take it out to the public. Anybody who is in the attendee list wish to weigh in? Please raise your Zoom hand if you do. I don't see any Zoom hands going. So we'll bring it back. Any further discussion by the board members? I still just see one hand, but that's the same old hand, right? Okay. Then.
Oh,
Did you have a?
It's
Another
the same
comment?
old hand. It's the same old hand.
Sorry, I shouldn't call it like that, but I think it was a residual. All right, then a roll call vote, please.
Director Zefferman,
Yes.
Director Moore,
Yes.
Director Morton,
Yes.
Vice President Cortez,
Yes.
and President Schreiner.
Yes. All right, thank you. That was unanimous and the motion passes. It brings us to staff reports, 10A.
Yes, board, me again for the monthly fiscal impact of COVID-19 on the budget, on the district's finances. Included in the report are the budget and to actual revenues, the customer aging accounts balances as of July 9th, and you're going too fast. But that's okay. I can look at my board packet instead. I did want to let the board know that we did receive the arrearages funds just yesterday. So we deposited that, and staff is working on setting up the special codes in our Sprinklr system so that when we post the credits to the account, they go to the water portion of the customer's bill, so that it's where it's meant to be anyway. One other thing I wanted to mention is that the state is going to open up the application process for wastewater arrearages as well. So we'll be applying for that sometime next month when they open up the application process. So that's good news for our customers.
Yeah.
If you have any questions regarding any of the charts, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. I'm so excited that the state is going to help with that as well. And I'm so grateful to staff for putting in the time on getting these, on getting the drinking water funds that became available. And I don't know how many people really appreciate like how much work the district had to put into that, and how the customers didn't really even have to go through all the application process, which is, you know, more typical of some of the other assistance programs with 211. So thank you so much for working on that, and congratulations for getting the state to help us, help our customers, over 300 families. Any questions from the directors? I don't see any hands going up. I think that means we can move along.
Sorry, Director or President Schreiner, I had a question.
Director Zimmerman on the
Yeah.
last.
Yeah, my question is on the, I think I'm in the right section, on the letter on page 99 of our packet and on page 100. Have these gone out, or are these?
These letters have gone out. These are the sample letters that inform those that were either eligible and will be receiving a credit. And then on page 100, part of the program requirement, which is also what district would do anyway, is to send the notice of delinquency and to set up to offer the payment program.
Do you know if we've had a good response, the district has had a good response to the letters?
Well, I think that we have been getting a good response from those that are receiving funds so far.
Okay, so the people getting the first letter, you've got a good response, maybe
if you
not
got
as
the
good.
first letter, you're
The letter
you
saying
call
we're
right
giving,
away.
we got your money.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. I don't see any more hands going up. We'll go on to 10B. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Schreiner. So item 10B is the quarterly capital improvement project report. The attached report lists the active projects with the project number, the title, the description, and the justification. Also attaches a map showing the project. I just wanted to highlight a couple of the projects for the board. The A1A2 tanks project, that's our largest project, one of our largest projects, maybe perhaps the district's ever endeavored. If you get by close to the site, it's over in CSUNB, you will see two large concrete rings that have been poured for the tank. And so those are a demonstration of the progress. They've finished all the grading, the underground gravity utilities are completed. They've got the rings poured, and we're working with further working with CSU on some of the easement issues, but that project is moving along in a nice fashion, especially with all the rain we encountered in December. We were really worried about some of the erosion issues we were going to have, given the grading for the pump house was already done, and we had kind of an open face cliff there. And another project I wanted to highlight was the intermediate tank project. So the intermediate tank is a kind of a central heart, or maybe an artery of our system that is requiring maintenance. And so currently it's been drained, and so our O&M staff had to work move heaven and earth, if you will, last week, and we're talking multiple nights of no sleep in order to get our system to operate in a functioning manner, given that we had to drain that tank. So we've since accomplished that thanks to our O&M staff, Derek's team. And so the tank's been drained, it's been cleaned, and the sandblasting operations are occurring. The tank is near some of the CSUNB housing out to the eastern portions of our district. And so we've notified all those residents. So if you do hear about some noise issues, we have notified them. There will be some noise accompanying this project, given that they're going to coat the tank with new paint, and what it requires is it to be dehumidified, which is an operation that needs to occur 24 hours a day in terms of a dehumidification device being installed there. But that project is moving along. We have some of the work in our central chlorination spot at that site has been completed. We're getting ready to install our valves, and the sandblasting is occurring, as I said. And with that, I can take any questions on any of the other projects that the board may have.
Director Moore.
So quick question on project number 3, which is GW0305 on page 102. That's to do some replumbing in the vicinity of the sand tank. Is that correct?
Yes.
There has been great sensitivity in the community due to all the tree removal that Sea Haven has been involved in recently. Has the routing and the design of that been put together, and is there any tree removal required?
There's no tree removal required with this. It's all going to be a pipe that's going to be installed in Imgen Parkway.
Okay. All right, good. But nothing down near the sand tank itself, because there are trees in that general vicinity.
Not at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? I don't see any hands just yet. I did have one question in number 6 on page 103 at the top, MW0163. I just wanted to ask about the comment, no funding for trenchless construction on the far right. Are there other options being explored, or is this going to come back to the board for the funding amendment?
Yes, President Schreiner. Near this area, there's a new development to the north of Marina being contemplated, and staff is investigating with that design team whether or not we can accomplish the flow characteristics and necessary connections and to our system with the installation of additional pipes within that development that connect around the locations of where this new pipe was going to be, given the sensitivity with the trees and the congestion with the area. And so when the no funding for the trenchless construction, statement was inserted, I believe it was within the context of the project budget that they were working within. And so in the next update, I'll remove that particular item and further embellish what we're doing and what we're contemplating on that, if assuming we haven't found a resolution.
Okay, so it might be a matter of timing.
Yes.
With the new, okay, thank you for that. I see Director Zefferman. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had a question on project number 13. It said construction of the Giggling Force main to begin in November 2021. Did that construction begin?
Yes, and it's nearing completion in terms of the actual installation of the pipe itself. If you ever get over into this off of Giggling towards Highway 1, you will see a lot of temporary paving on one half of Giggling Road. And what that is, that's a temporary pavement job that's covering the new force main that's been relocated into the road. And so most of the pipe is installed. And there'll be, we just actually met with the city of Seaside to discuss how much paving replacement they want to see with that. And so we're nearing completion. So yes, it did proceed in November.
Great. And we're on track that's on track to be finished by March?
Yes.
Perfect. And then my other question is for the odor control for the Imgen Parkway lift station. This is begin design in January 2022. Has that design begun?
We have not commenced that design as of yet. Due to some of our personnel challenges we've been having, it's been delayed a bit. We will get on it though.
We still have days in January. We're okay.
I didn't say that it was late. I'm just wondering, you know, in the first 19 days of January, whether the design has begun on that or not, on that project.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
I was very honest with that answer. So.
Okay, great. No, I understand that we are have a shortage of engineering staff at the moment. So, all right, thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands for the board, we'll go to 10C.
The board, this is the fourth quarter 2021 district water consumption report. We call it the quarterly consumption report because we do it on a quarterly basis, but it's an accumulative report. And this is the report for the calendar year 2021. So beginning on page 108 is the actual table for the consumption for history of 10 years. And you can see comparison from 2021 to 2020. 2021, actually, we consumed 7.4 more acre feet than we did this year. Excuse me. We did 2021 did, that's right. From 2020 to 2021. I'm sorry, I got a little confused there.
Okay.
Overall, though, I was going to point out that Central Marina had much less consumption for the year 2021 than they had in 2020. You go back, yes, thank you. So from 1434 to 1375, so that's quite a difference. It's over 50 acre feet. That was made up, unfortunately, by the Ord community with the golf course this year. They had to, they had problems, and they had to have, or they started to take their remaining water that they have with us per agreement. So they used about 49 acre feet. So it offset each other. So that's why we look like we only used, you know, the 7 acre feet less, but it was actually more than that if we did consider the golf course.
Okay.
Do you have any questions? There's also a list of variances. attached if you have questions on that. And then you have the graphs for the year.
Okay, any questions from the board members? One of the things that I remember different staff, Paul Lord would do for the Water Conservation Commission on the table like that we have the comparison of 10 years on page 113. He would also add a line that showed how many meters, how many different water connections, not meters like distance. But I think what it brings to my mind tonight is just that it's kind of either leveled off or tapered off a tiny bit over the last 10 years, becoming more like 3,200 altogether from, I think it was a high around 2013 of 4,000. And yet we've added meters, right? We've added accounts from approximately 8,000 to 10,000. So it's a pretty significant percentage of increased accounts, while the customers are also doing a very good job of conserving. I think that's really amazing for the district. Just to see that we haven't seen a number of accounts and a kind of a water consumption going up in a parallel fashion. We're seeing people use less water and we have more meters. Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing. So anyway, I don't know if we can show that graphically, but I just wanted to kind of tell you what I'm thinking about, I guess. Anybody else have a question? We'll move on then to 10D Delta.
D are the sewer flows for 2021, and this is for the quarter ended December 31st. In addition, like the consumption report, it's a cumulative report for the year, so you'll have the full 12 months through December 31st. So if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from board members on the sewer flows? All right, then I think that concludes the staff reports. We have informational reports. I believe we start with general manager's report.
Good evening, board members of staff and the public. Just a few items for you this evening. We have shortlisted our PR firms to the last two. We'll be asking those two firms to present to our outreach committee in February, and then we will prepare the necessary contracts to bring them on board and start some of our brand work. So very excited about that. Strategic planning, we have the draft framework from BHI in-house right now, and we're working with that to make sure that everything is coherent and aligned. And Brent and I have a call coming up here, I think next week or so, and we will put together the last pieces of the framework, run that by the management team, and we will set up our workshop in February, hopefully late February, maybe early March. Recruitment. So we have brought Alliance on board, and we have had our kickoff meeting with Alliance Recruiting, and they are going to begin recruiting for our DE and our, can't even say it, Kelly, for our administrative services director.
Oh.
Anyway, so we've had the kickoff meetings of preparing the brochure. We're going to stagger them. So DE is first and administrative services director is second. We are currently meeting with, or I'm meeting with Paul Chuteau of M1 Water to discuss how the AWT funding has been structured and how Marina Coast is going to leverage its capacity in the phase 1 portion of the project and potentially the phase 2 portion of the project to ensure that all 1427 acre feet of our capacity within the system is utilized, whether that is as AWT water, as purified water, or as tertiary treated water off of the CSIP system. So we have agreements also with Marina County, Monterey County WRA. And so I'm also talking with Brent Buki to talk about how we activate those provisions in our agreements with WRA to take CSIP water if we're going to take it as tertiary water. So we're going to take our 1427 one way or the other, whether it's to supply our customer on Armstrong Ranch, or to take it out to take it into the cities to provide water for our residential and commercial customers. This is really an effort by staff to ensure that we have revenue to try to bolster our recycled water system and not shift the lion's share onto our treated water customers. That's really what I'm trying to accomplish. And then also got word from CSDA, the California Special Districts Association, that they had a deal with the Ferguson Group to do grant writing for special districts, and it comes with a discounted retainer and a number of applications. So I reached out to the Ferguson Group at I want to say the beginning of the week, but that seems like only yesterday. At the beginning of the week, called their head of grant writing, Heidi Schott, and to see if we could connect and find out if there are some services that they could help us with to try to acquire significant portions of the infrastructure monies that are coming out of the federal government and the state. So those are some big activities for us at the moment, and I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
I love hearing about grants. All right. I don't see any hands going up right there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council's report.
I have no report.
All right. And now we get into the committee and board liaison reports. Executive committee. Vice President Cortez, would you like to say?
Yeah, it was my kind of introduction to the executive committee. And so it was kind of a transition for me, and just kind of understanding my role and how I can support President Schreiner and the district. And also we got a better understanding of kind of the goals for the year and what we'll be diving into as the months progress. So.
Thank you. And I heard something about a policy manual consolidation or organization. So I'm looking forward to that. Community Outreach Committee.
Sure, I'll take it. So in the last meeting, we discussed our transition. Well, in general, we welcomed Director Moore to the Community Outreach Committee, and more in the loss of President Cortez. And then we also discussed the transition of our video content to YouTube hosting, and how we're going to, thanks to the work of Tio, maintain copies of our recordings of our board meetings. We discussed the process of bringing on a community relations firm for the district, and an update to the communications with the public in regards to the shut-off moratorium, as we saw the letters in the packet today. So Director Moore, is there anything you want to add?
No, you've covered it very well, Director Zefferman. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Budget and Personnel Committee.
So we had our first meeting, and largely it was informative overview on how we construct the budget and the function of the committee in getting through into the grit, or I don't remember what Rem calls it, but we are in the weeds. We're supposed to go through the weeds, the details, and then bring it back. It'll come back to the full board. So we review it, we look at it, we try to decide if in fact it's necessary cost, and if we have money to pay for it. And if in fact we need to fund money for particular projects, make recommendations to the board. I think that's a fair summary of what the role of the committee is and what I learned. And then with regard to personnel, it was a brief overview. No action was taken in with regard to either. It was basically get your feet wet, understand what you're supposed to do in the future.
Perfect, thank you. LAFCO liaison.
Yeah, there was a special meeting on January 5th, I think, pertinent to the district and our ratepayers. The commission formally denied Monterey Peninsula Water Management District's activation of the latent powers to provide and maintain potable water production. And so that became official on January 5th. And then this upcoming 24th, there will be another meeting with the second part of their resolution, and that would be to allow the annexation of 2 parcels for Monterey Peninsula Water Management. So those are the updates I have for the board.
Thank you. All right, Special District Association. Director Moore.
So we had a virtual meeting last night, actually, on Tuesday night. We heard from the county assessor, who talked a great deal about where the net property tax values are going in the county. Of course, we are primarily, at the moment, I think exclusively a fee-for-service special district, so none of that really impacts us very much. Also, the current slate of officers was reappointed for another year. This was the end of their first year in office, and it's not in the organizational documents or bylaws of the Special District Association of Monterey County, but it has been the practice to keep the current leadership for 2 years in a row, typically. So that's what I saw. Several other folks attended. They may have seen something.
Yeah, it was an interesting meeting, and a large number of people that I don't usually see at the meeting. All right, do we have a board member request for future agenda items?
So I do have a question. Did we forget Monterey One Water?
I think maybe we did. Can we add it at this point? I don't know that we can. Can you put it into your director's comments?
Sure.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. Sorry, a little oversight on that one. So board member requests for future agenda items? All right, then we'll go to director's comments, and it sounds like Director Moore, you would like to mention what went on with M1 Water.
So there was no business meeting in December that I haven't already reported on. Our next meeting is the 31st. There is also a recycled water committee meeting tomorrow afternoon that I'll participate in. One of the interesting items is whether Monterey One Water, how Monterey One Water should or should not go forward with a request from Cal-Am to make an agreement having to do with Cal-Am's use of Monterey One Water's outfall for purposes of disposing of brine from the currently non-existent and perhaps never existent Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project desalination plant. So that is going to be an interesting topic, both for the committee tomorrow, and then the committee will make some sort of recommendation to the board of directors, which presumably will be discussed on the 31st. Also under my comments, I keep hearing, in fact, I had to stop by PetSmart with my wife today to pick up some stuff, and took an extra long time, and PetSmart was closing early, and they are understaffed. Why are they understaffed? They're understaffed due to Omicron. And I certainly hope that our staff is safe and we have not been seeing staff quarantine losses to Omicron. But stay safe out there. It's apparently a pretty damn contagious bug. Lastly, I would like to suggest a referral to the Budget and Personnel Committee. I noted that, oh shoot, what's the page of the report here. I should have had that handy. It is the, well, we have $6.7 million in a checking account. I have to assume that it gets about 0.00001% interest. We also have 16 or $18 million in LAIF, which gets quite a bit more than 0.001 interest. So I would encourage Budget and Personnel to take up a discussion of how we should handle that checking account and how much what the policy ought to be for moving money in and out of the checking account back into LAF at some point. So just suggested referral if Budget and Personnel wants to take that up. Thank you very much. And everyone stay safe, please.
Thank you. Director Morton.
So I guess my comments are more some questions. We talked about basically a fire suppression workshop with the city and the city fire department, and I don't have that anywhere on my calendar or a focus on it. So I'm just raising that flag that I'm still interested in that happening. The other thing is the county was going to do a water workshop, and it was supposed to be in November or December, and then it's February, and is it March? Do we have a date? Is that still happening? Is that scrapped? The other question, I'll just ask all of them, okay. And then the other question I have is, I know that we as a board and public hearing I'm anticipating there's a workshop for the strategic plan, that what's circulated in-house is just like what's going to happen at that workshop, what's the framework, how that's going to happen, and not an actual plan being devised, that we sit down and do that. And the question is when. I want to get it on my calendar, as does everybody else. So when is that anticipated to happen? After COVID, when it is safe, I would really appreciate if I can enlist somebody to have a facilities field trip that I can actually see what the heck a lift station looks like and have a clear understanding before we go into the CIP project. It's a foreign language to me in the sense that I read law books and you guys put your hands on things that make a lot more sense, and visual might be beneficial, but I don't want to do that till after COVID. And I don't want to impose if it's not easily done. The other thing is that the Budget and Personnel Committee was asking that all of the directors, at least I would like a hard copy of the budget that we're able to work with as we come to our board meetings and review and look at as we're seeing items coming, like Mr. Breen's asking us to fund something, that we're able to know when he's referencing accounts, where in this budget we look. So those are my comments as trying to build teamwork with all of you, and Happy New Year to those of you that I haven't seen, and stay healthy because it's really scary.
That's for sure. Director Zimmerman.
Hi, so I just wanted to recommend that the staff take Director Morton up on her request to do a drive around. I know when I first started in the district, I asked for that, and the then general manager said I was the first board director to ask for that since I've been on it, and I found it really helpful to get a sense. Yeah, you're the second one. I think Director Lay might have also have done it. So I went around with I think Derek and the former general manager, and looked at the pump station, looked at the old Army stuff that we were replacing at the time, and looked at the big tanks up there at that we were putting in for the recycled water and stuff. And I found that really helpful. And I think also the general manager appreciated the chance to get out and see some of those things that he hadn't been to in a while. The other thing I want to say is sounds like I just heard that our Kelly Cadiente might be leaving us. Did I hear that right? And if so, I just wanted to, I don't know the timeline for that because the first I heard of it was a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to say that I have appreciated in my few years on the board her monthly reports of the district's finances and the annual awards that she and her efforts have been plotted. She has been getting the district with her financial management skills, and she'll be missed by me at least, and I think by the rest of the board. And so I was surprised and a little bit sad to hear that. So I just wanted to thank her for her service, and hopefully this doesn't mean you're leaving abruptly. That's all I have.
Thank you. No, she does such complicated work. I think our staff just want to make sure there's some overlap, and we're gonna see her some more. She's not leaving that soon.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Vice President Cortez.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue on the Kelly theme, and just for the public, I mean, the complexities here at the district, you know, Kelly makes it kind of straightforward for us, for the board and for the staff. And probably one of the projects that to me has been really kind of personal has been the arrears program that Kelly took on, and Director Sefferman, ensuring that our ratepayers with fixed incomes, the ones who are behind payments, had a relief that the government, the state of California was providing them. And that all started from data that was collected by Kelly and her team and her staff, and they were able to submit in September. And now to read the report on 10A and see that 331 letters were sent out to those ratepayers really shows like the execution of such programs. And so I just want to let the ratepayers know that your staff is really taking care of you. You have really strong board members like Director Sefferman in the Community Outreach Committee, ensuring that if there's anything that we can do to support our ratepayers to be more informed about their water and their rates, we're going to do it. And so I just want to highlight that to the public and highlight that that element that Kelly has brought in this last year in this small area. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think sometimes we forget as board members or residents, we just don't realize how much work is going on that's really healthy. And some of it in my mind is even these recent storms in, I think it was early January, late December, where we had so much rainfall. And I was reading about Pacific Grove having sewer spills and Southern California having some massive sewer spills, and I was fingers crossed all the way that Marina Coast is staying on top of it. And it sounds like we've made some really good investments recently, so that we've really gotten through the first wave of 2022. So we'll see how that goes. But I think sometimes we take for granted all this material that's moving through our pipes, and the work that goes into making it all go smoothly and stay contained. And so I'm just really pleased with how this winter has gone so far in that regard. And then I mentioned to somebody else recently, I think we've gotten over $20 million in grants recently for some of the work that's been going on with water. And they were surprised. They just couldn't believe it in this day and age. But I think everyone, well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people in leadership are realizing the aging infrastructure just needs that TLC. We just need to maintain the systems and then continue to improve them. And then that work also goes, I think, to some degree unnoticed. As long as everything is being maintained well and improved gradually, we just, turn on the tap and there it comes. So thank you, staff, for all that kind of unapplauded work, the work that goes on quietly to keep everything running smoothly and keep everything safe. And then with our Director Morton's questions about the calendaring, is that something that you could send out, do you think, to the board members, or do you want to let her? Yes? thank you, staff, for doing that, because I'm sure we're all gonna need to get those dates as much as we know them into our calendars to hold those dates. I do see we have a special meeting scheduled for February 1st at 5:30. And at this point, I think it's time for us to adjourn to that time. And I was wondering if might just have a moment with Vice President Cortez and our General Manager Schertzinger on this Zoom as after we close out. Yeah. Everybody else have a lovely evening, what's left of it, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
All right.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, staff.
Have a great
Thanks.
evening, everyone.
Good night.